don't know if anyone can see me. This is my first time doing this. Let's check it out here on YouTube. Welcome to our live upcoming. Let's see here. I'm going to head back over and see if anything's connected. I don't know. Doesn't look like it is. Upcoming. Oh yeah, here we are. We're all live on YouTube. Cool. And I'm gonna check X for a second. Oh yeah, look, it worked. Wow, I'm so good at this. I am a pro. I doubted myself and I had no need to. How exciting. Well, Jeff, thanks so much for joining us today. Are you proud of me? Learning new things.
I am proud of you. Thank you for doing this.
Yes. So I want to start by talking to you about something rather spicy that happened just a few days ago. I first saw Jason Kenney responding to it. Let's see here. I'm going to pull up the article. Basically, Jason Kenney shared this article. Here we go. We have it here. Canadian separatists optimistic after meeting with Trump officials. Now, the article quotes Dennis Modry from the Alberta Prosperity Project, and they talk about your meetings with the State Department, which, as my audience knows, I was the first person to report on. Talks about all the meetings that you've had, how you guys are hoping to go down for a fourth meeting. So 3 times you've already met with officials from the State Department. And then, of course, the article begins sort of attacking this. Here we have it. A former senior U.S. career diplomat described the meetings as irresponsible as hell and highly unusually, especially with a neighboring country. And then it appears that they tried to basically, create distance between you guys and the Treasury. So a Treasury spokesman declined to comment on the meetings, but did basically acknowledge that Scott Bessant thinks that, they wouldn't say if he supported the separatist movement. Well, I would say from his comments, it certainly seems like he does. But he did acknowledge that Carney is acting in the interests, against the interests of oil-rich Alberta. And then the State Department and the White House also put distance between the administration and the separatist movement, with one official saying the department regularly meets with civil society types. As is typical in routine meetings such as these, no comments were made. And then a White House official said, all unnamed sources, by the way, which is very interesting. A White House official said administration officials met with a number of civil society groups, so exactly the same line. No support or commitments were conveyed. Obviously, they're referencing the line of credit there. And then the U.S. ambassador to Canada, Pete Hoekstra, told NBC News that he had no info about the meetings with the state, with the discussions. And then, of course, as I said, they also said that there basically won't be another meeting. So
yeah, well,
I want to get it directly from you. What did you think about this? Of course.
Oh, I thought it was pretty funny. Like, it just goes to show first of all, it's NBC, right? So you can't put a lot of weight on what they have. I love the fact that all of their sources are unnamed. The one guy that says this is irresponsible as hell, I mean, just demonstrates that Trump hasn't reached down far enough into the State Department to fire all of the Hillary Clinton and Obama holdovers, right? And I think there needs to be some more firing going on there. There may well be when they root this guy out. I've subsequently had discussions with my contacts at the State Department. They told me just to ignore all this, and they're in the process of tracking down all of the unnamed sources who didn't have authority to speak on these issues, and things will proceed from there. That being said, again, anytime Jason Kenney quotes something, everybody has to consider the source. I mean, Jason Kenney is basically a paid mouthpiece for ATCO. He's a paid mouthpiece for Bennett Jones. He's basically the establishment mouthpiece on independence, and he has zero credibility in Alberta. I mean, I was laughing with a friend of mine who actually has family in Dog Pound, Alberta. Jason Kenney could not get himself elected dog catcher in Dog Pound, Alberta. I mean, that's how irrelevant he is politically in Alberta. So anything Jason Kenney has to say, including all of his name calling and and the rest of it, we just, first of all, we ignore it on one But on the other hand, we're actually really grateful for it because every time Jason Kenney opens his mouth, it reminds another 10,000 Albertans to go out and sign the petition. So, we're pretty
we can
grateful
talk more
for him
about
doing what he does
Jason
because,
Kenney in a second. I know there was a couple things you wanted to say, but just
sure.
to be clear, since this article was released, you've still been in contact with your sources in the State Department, and they said ignore the entire article, it's BS, and we're actively trying to track down the sources that gave those quotes to NBC, and sounds like they're going to be in a lot of trouble if not let go from their positions.
Well, and again, like that one unnamed source who's literally saying that this is irresponsible as hell. You have somebody apparently who values their jobs that they think it's appropriate to refer to the administration as quote unquote irresponsible as hell. So do those sound like the words of somebody that values their job, right? So it's pretty. I found the whole thing pretty interesting, to be frank.
So you and I have
and again, and I think this. Go ahead. No. I was going to say, I think there's been a concerted effort on the part of sort of the globalist mainstream media to try to create wedges between our movement and the administration. It started with that fake news Financial Times piece that was really just regurgitating news that you broke over almost a year ago now, making it out like this is some big, covert meetings between Alberta separatists and the Trump administration. I mean, there wasn't anything covert about what we did. I think between the 6 million views you got directly from your post that you put out, and then all of the subsequent engagements, I think that post had over 100 million engagements. So it wasn't like we were doing anything covertly, including having press conferences and press releases before and after various meetings that we've had, at a senior level in the State Department. So, we are where we are on that. I mean, we're still in touch with our contacts at the State Department. There'll be meetings at some time in the future. They're busy. We're busy right now. We're focused on getting over our 20,000 canvasser goal. We're focused on canvassers right now, not signatures, because we want to crush whatever number is required for our signature campaign. So that's ongoing. So that's where our focus is right now. And obviously we have lots of things to do in that regard, including, we need to get a campaign in place to arrest and have all the people arrested, fined, who've been interfering with our petitioners and coming up and interrupting them and calling them names and threatening them.
We'll get to that in a second. We'll get to that in a second, Jeff.
Yeah.
I just want to say, so you've been 3 times. This 4th meeting that you have planned, you're still going ahead with that plan to go down and visit with these U.S. State Department.
Oh yeah, it's at some point. They've been busy. We've been busy. We don't have anything scheduled right now, but given my last conversations with the State Department, there's no reason that we're not going to be scheduling it at some point here, in the next month or so. Everybody's busy. President Trump is busy saving the world and bringing peace to the world. We're busy freeing Alberta from Canada. There's nothing really to meet with them at this stage. We're working forward on our feasibility study for a $500 billion credit facility. Whether we meet or not, we don't need to meet to do that. We have our contacts. We're working forward with the people we're working forward with. There's nothing stopping this train now that it's left the station. That's for sure.
One of the things I found a bit ironic about this whole thing, and also, of course, Jason Kenney's response, who's laughing at it, is on one hand, you have people saying, you guys are traitors, going down to the United States and talking to them about whether they would basically recognize an independent Alberta and whether they would be able to offer any support during this process. And they're very angry about that. And then on the other hand, when this article with unnamed sources comes out trying to distance the State Department from you guys, then these same figures who called you treasonous and said this is the worst thing I've ever heard in my life, these are the worst people, they should be hung, they're saying, see, they don't have the connections anyways. So it's like, which is it? Is this the worst thing that's ever happened? Is this the greatest tragedy? Are you committing a crime against Canada? Or is it funny and not to be taken seriously? They sort of like they want to play both sides of the field and whatever latest.
Well, but again, it's all they've got, right? They can't give reason that Alberta will be better off financially the day after they vote no to independence, right? The day after they vote for the status quo when everything remains the same. Well, they can't tell you why Albertans are going to be better off if everything remains the same. But of course, we can give you hundreds of good reasons as to why Albertans are going to be so much better off financially and economically the day they vote no to independence, starting with a complete end to all federal income tax in 2027. So, there'll be no more federal income tax in 2027 if we vote ourselves out of Canada this year. And we're excited for that. Doubling CPP, doubling old age security, all of those things are possible in year one of independence. And all the other side has to say, is this is ridiculous and things are going to be horrible and you're going to lose jobs and you're going to be landlocked and all the nonsense that they normally, you're traitors, don't worry about being better off economically because you're traitors. Like, it's silly. Like, that's the level of debate. I mean, like, if you're scoring this as as some sort of high school debate, the other side isn't even on the board. They don't have a single point. So it's really, really funny what's going on. Like, I watched part of that so-called debate with that Troy Westwood person that you had on. I don't even know why people listen to him at all. I mean, like, what did he have to offer? Nothing, right? Like,
well, I actually wanted
You're spoiled brat.
I actually wanted to bring up something that came up in the debate, because this is something that I keep hearing again and again and again is, so as you mentioned, we had done that interview back in March 2025, I believe it was, when you first said, we're organizing a delegation to go down to DC to pitch the Trump administration on statehood, was I believe the wording that you used at the time. And at the very beginning of this latest resurgence of the independence movement, let's call it, there was a conversation at the beginning about independence versus statehood. And you guys went down, you met with officials, you also heard from your membership over at APP, and the consensus was pretty clear that people aren't interested in statehood. Yes, there is a small segment of the overall independence movement that is interested in statehood, but it's a very small minority, and the vast majority of people who are pro-independence want Alberta to be a sovereign nation. And you've also heard from the State Department that statehood wouldn't be a possibility. And so in the months since, the plan that's been moving forward is one focused on sovereignty, but people continue to take these, so it's basically, there's a timeline that we've been working with here and developments have been made, and yet people keep going back and they keep taking some of the first comments that you've made, maybe the first interview that I did with you, and they're saying, look, their plan really is statehood all along. That's what they're pushing for, without acknowledging that, no, this has really been a process. And as we've learned things and discovered things, we've focused in on what exactly it is that we're trying to do. And you even came out and said on my show a couple weeks ago, statehood is off the table. It's independence that we're moving forward with. And so that's something that I've seen come up time and time again. And it's frustrating because these people are either incredibly unintelligent or they're just dishonest. And it's one of the number one.
It's the second one, maybe with a bit of combination of the first. I mean, they're dumb and dishonest, right? And again, when we went down, when we went down to Washington the first time, and even when I was speaking to you the first time, we were just saying, hey, for fun, let's go down to Washington and see if they're going to offer us a better deal. Because we know the deal with Canada is lousy. Let's go find out what the United States is prepared to offer to Alberta if Alberta were to leave Canada and become a state. It was, as much as anything, a thought exercise, and essentially initiating a conversation in and around this issue. Well, we initiated the conversation. It was clear from our membership's perspective and the people that support Alberta independence that only the smallest proportion of the Alberta people in the Alberta independence movement favor full-on statehood with the United States. I've spoken about this, with numerous experts on the subject that have looked into the issue, including meeting with Sarah Palin from Alaska and all those types of things, right? And the consensus was that Alberta would be far better off as an independent country than a state. And then even to become a state, there's this whole process that, first of all, getting independent from Canada to begin with, developing our own constitution, then we'd have to be approved by 2/3 of the U.S. Senate. And and this is what the State Department said, that the U.S. Senate, as it's currently formulated, is going to allow Alberta to become a state because we'd be a Republican state. They would then the Democrats would want, Puerto Rico and Guam, or Puerto Rico, Guam, and a constitutional amendment vis-a-vis Washington, D.C., in exchange. It's never going to happen. And on top of it, when you look at what we're trying to accomplish, which is basically developing home rule for Alberta and Albertans, where we can be governed by ourselves within our own country, being governed by by Ottawa or Washington, D.C. One's probably or just as bad as the other in terms of having laws imposed upon us by people that don't understand us, don't like us, can't, deal with the way that we want to do things, which is largely, to be, able to work and live and generate income for our families with the minimum amount of government taxation and regulation, right? And the minimum amount of government interference. So, we all know that, we don't want to replace CRA with, however the US Treasury is now operating, the IRS. We don't want to replace, Stephen Gibault with the EPA. We don't want to, exchange one set of bad rules and regulations for another that we all have to figure out. There's a very easy transition from Alberta as a province to Alberta as a country. We have a transitional provision, that we adopt laws as Alberta laws in the short term, other than those that are set out in the initial constitution of Alberta. And then we just go through a process of getting rid of all of the laws that make absolutely no sense for us. Like for the first, year and a half of Alberta's existence, we won't need to make any laws. We'll just need to be getting rid of all of the laws that make no sense for us, either federally or provincially. Because don't forget, we're saddled with a lot of really bad regulation and a lot of really bad bureaucracy in this province that, was brought in under, socialists like Jason Kenney and Rachel Notley, right?
You're
we've got to clean
choir,
up the
Jeff.
mess that those two communists made. Yeah. I mean, we've got to clean up the mess that, communists like Jason Kenney and Rachel Notley have made. And then, once we've cleaned up our own house, we're going to be in a much stronger position to move forward.
I personally look forward to the day where we go into Elections Alberta and say, we're starting over. Sorry, guys, y'all gotta take a hike. You've shown to be agents of the state working against the people, and I'm sorry, but you can't keep your job.
Well, it's probably 70 or 60 or 70% of the entire bureaucracy. I don't know how much dealings you probably had quite a bit to do dealing with various levels of associate deputy ministers and deputy ministers within the Alberta government. I mean, they're all creatures of Jason Kenney and Marshall Smith. I mean, they all need to be rooted out, root and branch. So I think that's a big important part of what we're doing here. Is we need to, not only do we need to liberate ourselves from Ottawa, but there's some major house cleaning that has to be done in Alberta, to make, Alberta function the way that it should, as a free and democratic society where the people's rights are respected, above the rights and privileges of bureaucrats, at the senior level who just lord themselves over us.
Absolutely. Over the weekend when I believe it was Rupert Lowe broke, his sort of launched his Restore Britain party. And, he said we have to do some very difficult and painful things because of the mass immigration that they've let into their country that is changing the way of Britain and changing what it means to be Britain. And he spoke extensively about that in his video. And he also talked about the red tape that they're seeing and how the state has become the enemy of its citizens. And I would say that we've absolutely seen that here. And I think you're correct that Ottawa isn't the only problem. We have problems within our provincial government that we need to change. A lot of bureaucrats that just simply we don't need to be paying for to do work, and just way too many laws. There's way too many restrictions around what we're allowed to do. The government is far too involved in it seems every aspect of private life these days. And so, it'll be nice to have some of that legislation off of the books. I have a question for you, Jeff. Maybe you're aware of this. I would assume you are. Do you realize how polarizing of a figure you are in the freedom movement?
I've heard it. I'm not everybody's cup of tea. I'll tell you. There's lots of. I get. I hate your cowboy hat. I hate this. I hate that. You don't fit in. Whatever. And my response to all those people, it's like, I'll tell you what. Get up at 6 o'clock every morning. You work as hard as I do to free Alberta, and then maybe people will listen to you too, right? All of the haters, I know they're going to be out there. I'm not everybody's cup of tea. What can I tell you? I have a sense of humor not everybody likes. On and on and on, right? I don't know what to say to that. And then of course, let's face it, there's the jealousy factor. There's people that don't think they're getting enough attention. We know who they are. They're the ones that every time I say anything that's the least bit critical of Danielle Smith, bless her name, that they lose their little minds because, they're either little fanboys of Danielle's or that she's promised them things, if they're nice to her, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know what to say to that. Like, you know, they are what they are. I'm trying to ignore it. I think that your husband and I have been talking quite a bit offline about how hard it is to be nice to people that are not being nice to you. We're trying to stay above it, you know, and I'm trying not to bite back at people that bark, you know, that say mean things about me. So, you know, it just is what it is. You know, what can I tell you, right?
Yeah,
You know,
a
there's,
lot
you
of
know, there's a lot of, there's a lot of pettiness out, there's a lot of pettiness out there, and I'm trying to stay above it, I guess is the best way to put it.
a lot of what you've said, I know my husband has definitely felt the same way. It seems people just always want to criticize the people who are doing something. They're, you know, sort of the armchair critics. That's a lot of people, and unfortunately, it's still a lot of people in the independence movement. And I've actually had a number of friends who've been involved that had to take a step back just because they couldn't take the pettiness of it. And you know, I understand that, but you have to sort of fight through it. And I think definitely, you know, not responding to the negativity is the right response. I was having a conversation in one of the independence group chats about this the other day, and we do definitely need to stay unified as a movement, and that for
But
a
here
lot of
you
us
are
will mean.
baiting me. You're baiting me. With that very question, you
No,
were
no,
baiting
I'm
me.
not baiting you. I just wanted to see if you had
I'm
heard the
trying my best.
rumors.
I'm no, no, I'm trying. No, no, I'm trying. Oh, I mean, it's ongoing. I mean, let's go back to myself, and Dennis Modry, Keith Wilson, you know, Marty. We were all called to that silly meeting by the Reconfederationists at the Ranchmen's Club. You know, where, you know, basically we're told that, you know, how we're supposed to behave ourselves to get us close to independence, but not all the way to independence. So Preston Manning and Michael Binion and all the retreaders, you know, can jump in and try to retread Confederation, right?
I
But they
hadn't
don't
heard of
want
this
us,
meeting, to
you
be
know, like
honest.
to, you know, oh God, oh no, that was a big thing.
This is
So
the first
Michael
time hearing of
Binion,
it.
okay, and it was involved Preston Manning. Here, let me back up. This is kind of a funny story.
But
So
when
let's
did this
start with
happen?
Ron Mannix, right? This happened, oh God, last summer. Last
Okay,
summer.
so I was off
So
then.
Ron Mannix, okay, Mancal Coal, Mancal Industries, like, you know, multi-billionaire whose name will never be on a Forbes list, right? And Michael Binion, right? Two of our Alberta billionaires, and Preston Manning decided that that we could not be the pointy end of the spear for Alberta independence, because we're embarrassing to them. We're going to wreck everything for them. And, you know, they, to the extent that we can succeed in getting close to independence, then they're going to have to come in. And Preston Manning, being one of the adults in the room, is going to have to take over, and then he'll negotiate for us. But he's not going to negotiate independence. He's going to negotiate what these clowns call reconfederation. Okay, reconfederation is basically what Danielle's talking about: strong Alberta within a united Canada. Those are the puppet masters that make her mouth move, right? So that's what's going on. So these people are behind, and that's why do you think Michael Binion was on the What's Next panel, right? This followed the Club last summer, right? And the whole point of that meeting was basically to try to tell all of us to behave ourselves, and not do anything that would quote unquote discredit the movement, because they don't want, you know, they don't want to be embarrassed being associated with us when they swoop in to take over and, you know, negotiate our reconfederation with Canada. You know, and needless to say, a lot of that was pointed at me, right? Because I am a polarizing individual, and you know, and a lot of people don't like the way that I speak. They don't like the things that I say. They don't like who I am as a person, et cetera, et cetera. But let's face it, what has, you know, that's what's got us here today. We are where we are, and none of the reconfederationists, not Preston Manning, you know, not Michael Binion, not Ron Mannix, you know, not, you know, any of their other little talking heads from Michael Binion's Miracle Network, you know, that are you know, that are ready to help Michael swoop in and take over and be the voice of reason with regard to, you know, independence. You know, not one of these people is out canvassing. Not one of them is out supporting our movement. They're just waiting for the day, like in the background, to pounce, right, on the movement so that they can then negotiate Alberta staying in Canada. But I think the problem for them is that they don't realize how far we've come in the last year and how big this thing has grown, and the amount of, you know, the number of people in this province who do not want to talk about reconfederation or negotiating a better deal within Canada, right? You know, everybody realizes the country's broken. Every time Carney opens his mouth and does something else, we realize that it's a fool's errand. I mean, we saw the MOU. I mean, Carney came out of it bragging about the 600% increase in the carbon tax, et cetera, et cetera. So, all of those people have just really been credited insofar as any hope of negotiating Alberta staying in Canada, is out the window. And I think that's why they've all been so quiet, frankly. I mean, I think they realize that this movement has run past them exactly as I warned them it would. I said, look, guys, either get on board because this is an express train, or you can just, stand in the tracks and be run over by the train. And I think that's basically what's happening is all these so-called reconfederationists have just been flattened by the express train of Alberta independence. And needless to say, they're nowhere to be seen. But they still don't want to join with the Jason Kenney communists and, Kenney, Kasich, Nenshi, Danielle, all of these people that are going to fight to keep Alberta in Canada against our will. They're not coming out publicly on their side, whether they're keeping their powder dry or they just realize now that it's a lost cause. I'm not sure.
I think I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall at that meeting to start with. But I think, and I've known Michael Binion for a number of years. I've interviewed him for stories before. And I think there is a place for the messaging, vote yes, so we can negotiate a better deal in Ottawa. That's not obviously what people like yourself are pushing for. But I think that when it comes to...
Because it's a lie.
Referendum,
it's a lie, and I'm not going to be party to a lie.
Well, so exactly. And so I think, but when it, and I keep telling these people right now, we're in a very different campaign than we will be in the fall when we have a referendum campaign. They're two completely different campaigns. And I think at that point, people like the Michael Binions of the world should come out and say, I'm voting yes, not because I want to leave, but because I want us to get a high vote and for us to negotiate a better deal, in Confederation. I think there is a place for that messaging. Because we certainly want everyone voting yes as possible. And then what happens after the vote is what happens after the vote.
I don't know. And I guess that's why I'll never go into politics. I think that's a lie and I think it's dishonest, right?
But if he's coming out and saying that because he genuinely wants that.
Let me finish.
Go ahead.
Let me finish. I mean, I think a positive campaign focused only on, what it is that we're trying to do, which is to take Alberta out of Canada and why it is that we want to do that and why it is that everybody's family is going to be so much better off is the only way forward. Because again, you look at the Clarity Act, right? The federal government or the provincial government or anybody could refuse to recognize this if they say, oh yeah, but so many of the people that voted just voted because they wanted to negotiate a better deal in Canada. I don't want people voting for that reason. I really don't. I want people coming out to vote for the reason that they know that in year one, there's going to be zero federal income tax, that we're going to be able to afford to double our CPP and OAS in year one, that we're going to be so much better off financially when we no longer send $70 billion a year to Ottawa and only get less than $20 billion a year back in direct transfers and services. So we're going to have this massive fiscal capacity surplus even after eliminating income tax and doubling pensions, right? So, I don't want to mislead anybody. I'm not running around the province to say, hey, vote for this, because then it gives us an opportunity to negotiate a better deal. None of our canvassers are working forward on that basis. None of them would be working as hard as they're working if they thought they were being party to a lie, which is specifically, oh yeah, we'll vote for this because this gives us a better opportunity to negotiate a new deal with Canada. There's no opportunity under the present Constitution to negotiate a new deal with Canada. Like, do you think the Maritimes are going to give up their 30 Senate seats for our 6? Do you think we're going to get more seats in Parliament? No. Do you think we're going to get more seats on the Supreme Court? No. Do you think they're going to end equalization? No. Like, nobody wants that. Like, Pierre Poilievre doesn't want any of that. So why would we lie to our fellow Albertans and suggest to them that that somehow or other supporting this movement opens the door to negotiating with Canada? It doesn't. The only thing we want is to get.
Well, I'm certainly not suggesting that you should lie. I just think when it comes to a referendum campaign, I think that it would be good to encourage all the people who are on the fence about voting yes to vote yes. And if the Michael Binions of the world want to come out and, start talking about what the benefit to them and to their movement would be, I think that would be a positive thing. But certainly you have your track and you have your movement and you need to speak for that movement and you need to be honest with them. But I think that it would be useful to have more people who want to vote yes for various reasons, also encouraging people to vote yes. At the end of the day, I'll take all the yes votes we can get, is where I'm coming from.
Sure, but but I'm convinced that we can convince everybody just on a straight up basis, and and quite frankly, the Michael Binions of the world, the Preston Mannings of the world, the Ron Mannixes of the world that have been manipulating things in the background forever, they have no place in this movement other than to get on board, right? Understand what the value is of a free and independent Alberta to everybody. Not just your tax shelters, not just your your relationships with people in Toronto and whatever else, right? This is an Alberta movement for the people of Alberta. And quite frankly, if the billionaires can't get on board with it, I don't care. They only each, it doesn't matter how many billions of dollars they all have, they only get one vote.
Mm-hmm. Well, I want to talk to you about kind of an update on the movement now, and you kind of referenced.
So
was
that polarizing? Was that polarizing enough for you?
I'll let you know what the feedback I get is like, I guess. I mean, I'm just saying I am hearing from like establishment types that you wouldn't think would ever vote yes that are telling me I am voting yes, not because I want to succeed, because I do want us to get a high vote so we can negotiate a better deal with ourselves. And at the end of the day, like a vote yes is a vote yes.
And God bless them, they're free to do that. But I think that if they think they're going to be taking over this movement at the end of the day, so they can negotiate with Ottawa, they're going to be very sorely surprised, because that's not where the bulk of the people that are out canvassing right now and the people that are signing the petition right now are, right. It's all well and good for the for the billionaires to try to sit back and say, hey, oh, we have a plan, don't worry about this. Even if it goes sideways and people vote themselves out of Alberta, it's going to be just like the equalization vote. We'll make sure it never happens, right? Mm-hmm. That's not going to happen this time around.
Well, and I guess I wasn't thinking about it from the perspective of people trying to take over the movement, because a lot of the people that I've spoken to are what we call closet separatists, people that would actually not come out and say, yeah, I'm voting yes for these reasons. And I'm saying if, those people are on the fence, I think we can encourage them. Now, I want to talk to you kind of an update on the movement, on the canvassers. You've said that you guys are hoping to get 20,000 canvassers. I've talked to Mitch Sylvester repeatedly, and he tells me time and time again, canvassers are how we're going to win this thing. We need, everyday people going out and collecting, 100 signatures a day, 10 signatures a day, whatever they can get every single day. That's how we're going to get to our million mark signatures. And there's a real fear for, at least for Mitch, and I know my husband, the CEO of Take Back Alberta, has said, we don't want people getting complacent. We want people feeling like this is a fight every single day and waking up and getting those signatures. So maybe you can just give me a little bit of an update on the signature collection effort.
Sure. As of yesterday, we were over 7,500 canvassers. So that's, the number's continuing to climb. We're on our way. We're on our way to 10,000. We want to be, at least to 10,000 by the end of the month. And then, we really want to get a big push on to get, to reach that 20,000 mark. Because not only, are those canvassers are going to get us to our million signature goal, right? But, that's going to be our army, our boots on the ground, going through the referendum camp with that massive volunteer base, energized to get people out to the polls to vote yes, right? So that's where we see this going, on a going forward basis. In a perfect world, we'd have 50,000 registered canvassers. Everywhere we go, everywhere I go, everywhere Mitch goes, we speak about the need for everybody. If you really support this movement and you really want to help, there's people in your environment that only you have access to. They're not necessarily going to go out and sign. They're not looking for pop-up events to go to. They might be shy about wanting to be seen at a table signing in public. So you've got those people, whether it's your mom and dad in a lodge, or or going to a family reunion, or clients that or customers that you have that quietly support independence, that might not go out on their own. Work your own networks, work your contacts. If everybody does that, we're easily going to make the million person mark, right? I've even put in for my canvassing badge. I'm late in getting it. I've been busy, obviously, with a lot of other things. But I'm gonna, we're talking about throwing blocks, right? And I was laughing with some friends, right? You see these people that are like setting up in their driveways, and their neighbors are coming over and whatever. My friends and I are all talking about, we should just throw big block parties. And the best part about it is you'll find out what neighbors you never have to speak to again, right? Like, it's really going to be a lot of fun, right? So there's all kinds of things that we can do. We've got, half of February left. So February, March, April, we have 10 weeks left. We need to be going, literally pedal to the metal all the way to the finish line. We still need people signing up and volunteering to be canvassers. We want to get up to that 20,000 canvasser goal. The canvassers are the backbone of this movement. The canvassers are the people that are literally the ones that are going to liberate Alberta. So, we need you to sign up. We need you to think about, the future of your children in Alberta, whether you want your children in Alberta. And if you do, and you want your kids and your grandkids to have a future in this province, volunteer to be canvassers. If you're a young person, if you're, 18, 19, 20, and you don't want to pay income tax in 2027, you want to be able to afford your own home. You want to see your parents and your grandparents have their pensions doubled and their old age security doubled. Volunteer, come out, get energized, be a canvasser. Come help get all your friends at school and get everybody else signed up for Alberta Independence, because we can win this thing. We will win this thing, but we all have to work together. This is our one chance to get this done.
So it's interesting you said I'm late to getting my canvasser badge. I've been on the fence about getting mine. No secret to my audience that I am very, pro independence, and this is one of those rare times in my career as a journalist where I'm like, no, this is something like this is like evil versus good. Like, I'm on the side of good here, clearly. So I have thought about getting it, but you and I have both seen those videos of canvassers getting harassed. And the truth of the matter is that if I were to do this, I would likely always have my kids with me, as I'm basically just a stay-at-home mom that, does some podcasting on the side for fun. And I don't think it's right to put my kids in that environment. And I was talking to Marty, and he says he has, basically every single day, he has people come up to him and very rudely sort of harassing him. I think you saw that video as well, where someone was driving and just started losing it on some canvassers. I mean, can anything be done about this?
Well, that's and again, I'm getting my canvassing badge in part for that reason, because I am going to go out and volunteer. And if there's anybody that anybody that harasses any station that I'm at, I'm going to I'm going to get out my phone. I'm going to take a picture of their little face, their little communist face, and I'm going to be phoning 911 or phoning the police. And under the Elections Act, they can be fined $25,000 and be subject to jail if they are physically interfering with canvassing for a citizens initiative petition, because this is a sanctioned Elections Alberta process, in the same way that having a ballot on election day is a sanctioned process. If you go into a polling place and disrupt the polling place, you will be arrested. Well, I'm calling out to all of our canvassers that if any of these jackwagons show up where you're at, get out your camera, film them, take video of them, take pictures of their snarling little lefty faces, and phone the police, have them arrested. Get their license plate numbers, $25,000 fines, right? And so I think it's time that we all start feeling in.
When you say they can't, physically disrupt the process, would someone who's driving by a polling station and who rolls down their window and starts hurling insults at the canvassers or whatever, would that constitute an offense?
That'd be borderline. That's more freedom of speech. And I think we all have to be big boys and big girls. I mean, if people, if that's all they've got, if that's their only argument, against independence, whatever, it just goes to show how weak the argument is for Alberta staying in Canada. But we had one, and they're trying to be really clever about it. I was at an event in a sign-up event in Bragg Creek a couple weeks ago that Rob Anders had organized. And, there were a couple little lefties that were coming up there with their cameras to try to disrupt the event. Well, we have questions. So they'll stand in front of the table and block other people from signing. And then we have questions. We want to ask questions. What about this? And what about that? And everybody online says you're a bunch of right-wing freaks and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, excuse me, please move on. If you're not signing the petition, you're disrupting other people from signing a petition. Get out your camera. Okay. This is an official Elections Alberta petition table. If you have any questions, you can find answers to them online or attend an event. You're not allowed to block other people. Please move away from the table, right? That's what's going on. And, those people were, be polite. But, but if anybody, is violent, uttering threats, whatever, just phone the police and have them arrested. But whatever you do, just move them away from the signing table and just say, like, you're disrupting an event. We have your picture, we've got your license number. whatever, we'll be phoning the police, be advised that you'll be the subject of an Elections Alberta investigation and subject to a $25,000 fine. Have a nice day. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yes, please step aside, or we'll
we
be
do
happy
as an
to
organization.
Yeah, sorry, there's
Yeah,
a little bit
we'll
of a
be
lag.
happy to see $25,000 go out of your bank account. What's that?
Absolutely. Sorry, I was just saying there's a little bit of a
Yeah,
lag.
I mean that's the. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I'm trying
no
not to
worries.
talk over you, really.
It's okay. You saw the comments on the last episode? No. I was just saying there's a little bit of a lag, so I start and then you start at the same time. But yes, I was essentially going to say, tell them step aside, or this is going to be a $25,000 fine. I think that should probably take care of the issue in most cases. Jeff, I'm going to leave it there today unless there's anything else you want to add quickly.
No, that's it. And I wanted to actually, John Bolton put out a good video this morning on that whole issue. I reposted it on my X account. And again, Rachel, thank you so much for everything that you do, and always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining. This is my first live that I've done myself. So to my audience, hopefully you guys found it. I'm going to go sign off and take a look. So thanks so much, everyone. We'll be back probably next week.
I'll be interested. Sure. And I'll be interested in hearing from people as to how polarizing they think I am.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thanks,
All right,
Jeff.
I'll talk to you later.
Yeah, have a good one. God bless everyone.
All right, have a nice day. Goodbye. Yeah, goodbye.